a big event for this company. Every year they went somewhere different, and it was an event where everyone dressed up in their Sunday best. They dressed to the nines, and they brought their family. This was something the entire company and the entire family got to enjoy together. And there were over 2,500 passengers that day that came to the port in Chicago to get ready for this picnic. It was kind of a rainy day. It was an early morning. It was raining in the morning. But the problem is, of those 2,500 passengers and of the Eastland, not only did it never make it out of the Chicago River, it never made it out of its own port. And here's what happened. 6:30 a.m., the passengers started to get on board, and they all kind of rushed over to one side to kind of wave to everyone who was standing over on the other end of the river, wanted to wave to their family. Well, immediately, because of the height that the ship stood and because of the skinniness of its design, it started to list. And then the crew started to try to offset this by bringing water into the ballasts, taking it out, bringing it in. And what ended up happening is they literally started a pendulum start with the ship back and forth while they were trying to correct it. By 7:25, almost an hour later, the list was so bad, that's when the panic really started to set in, and that's when they started to run, jump off the ship. And by 7:30 a.m., the Eastland had actually rolled over into the Chicago River upside down in just simply 20 feet of water, and over 800 passengers died in 20 feet of water that were trapped inside the ship. Now here's some other pictures from that actual day, and you'll see all the passengers who did get out standing on the ship waiting to be rescued.
Did any die? They all died?
800 of them did. Yep. And as you can see, it started to become quite the spectacle. People were coming around to see what was going on. This is near the end of the day when they finally got everyone cleared out. These tugboats came in and actually started to try to push the Eastland back up in its right direction. So what happened with 800 bodies to have to now be taken care of, makeshift morgues were needed immediately and right within that area. And so the bodies were stored in this building right here, which was the regiment armory at the time in Chicago. And this later became a very famous building in Chicago. And this is where Oprah ties into this. The armory eventually became Harpo Studios, which is reported to be haunted, and it is very possible we found the connection to why Tom Cruise acted possessed that day. It is very possible that's what happened, the spirits. Oprah never was open to talking about the haunts within Harpo Studios. She's always kept it very quiet. She's never denied it, but she won't talk about it. But the workers there were very open to talk about it. They talk about the traditional cold spots, a lot of electricity issues, strange smells, crying, full body apparitions. The most famous became known as the Gray Lady. It was almost looked like a gray cloak put over someone. And one of the producers actually talks about she was down on the floor getting ready for Oprah to come out. They were trying to get the crowd ready, and she remembers looking up at the very top of the seats and seeing what she calls the Gray Lady standing right there just prior to one of the shows. Other reported activity isn't just in Harpo Studios, which was the makeshift morgue, but actually now where the actual disaster happened. Screams of panic and terror from the Clark Street Bridge. Now, again, keeping in mind this is downtown Chicago, it could be anything. But a lot of reports of the panic and terror screams in that area. These are actual pictures. When Brad and I were there in Chicago a few years ago, this is what it looked like. Actually very run down, which was sad to see. But this was where the ship would have been lined up, right in this area. And this is looking on the other side. That's where the ship would have been, right in that area as well. But the good news is, since we were there, they've actually put a lot of money into it, and they've restored it now. And they actually have a river walk where you can go down and pay your respects for the lives that were lost there. And it's open to the public, so excellent opportunity to get down in that area and learn a little bit more about the history. They do have a plaque out there commemorating the lives and the people that were lost there. So whatever happened to the possessed ship as it became known after that, it was not done with its duties on the seas just yet. Actually became part of the military. The U.S. Navy took it over and it became the USS Wilmette and stayed in operation for quite a while. And it was finally decommissioned in November of 1945. Now the ironic thing, the weird twist is when you figure the history that this ship had and when its final days were, actually it became sold for scrap metals on Halloween of 1946. So kind of a weird twist for the end of the Eastland disaster.
Whitefish Point Lighthouse, how many people have been out that way? Good. If you haven't been, you should.
We stayed the night out there.
Beautiful location. 1848 was a very significant year for paranormal research. It was the year that Catherine Crowe, the British author, put out her book, The Night Side of Nature, which came to be recognized as the first real scientific release of a paranormal book. Also back here in the States, it was the year that the Fox sisters founded the spiritualist movement in New York. And right here in the UP, it's when the original Whitefish Point Lighthouse was built. Now, you wouldn't recognize this as today's Whitefish Point. It was brick construction. The first keeper, James Starr, resigned before he ever actually took possession of the lighthouse. This was not a desired position for anyone in the light saving service at the time. It was desolate, especially in the winter months. Very few people lived at Whitefish Point year-round. It was mainly a seasonal fishing village, and it just was not a place that somebody wanted to bring their family to take care of the lighthouse, raise your kids. It was traded off on several occasions for other positions, with monies being traded hands to get a different keeper to come in and replace people. Here's what you'd recognize today as Whitefish Point. This was put up in 1861. They figured out right away that there was very little chance that the original structure could stand against Lake Superior's winds and waves coming across it. It began to deteriorate very quickly. Now, the structure as we know it now was signed off by President Abraham Lincoln on the eve of the Civil War due to the significance of Great Lakes shipping at the time. This is just a chart of known shipwrecks in Lake Superior, keeping in mind there are many, many shipwrecks besides this that are unaccounted for. We don't know where they went on. And the loss of life on the Great Lakes is just staggering, especially on the shipwreck coast leading to Whitefish Point. Of course, probably the most famous, the Edmund Fitzgerald, the largest ship lost on Lake Superior. November 9th, 1975, it was the 10th, they figured it went down. The last transmission, we're holding our own. After that, nothing heard from the Fitzgerald again. All 29 lives lost. The bell, which was brought up, anybody that's been to the Shipwreck Museum has seen this right when you enter the doors. It's kind of awe-inspiring. We just had a case that we were working on the Valley Camp, actually, that we were working around a couple of the wrecked lifeboats from the Edmund Fitzgerald, that we had some strange knockings going on. We caught a couple of voices. We're still reviewing some of the evidence from that investigation. And very interesting, at the time we were doing this investigation, one of our guys that was up on the deck radioed down and let us know that the Arthur Anderson was going by, which was bizarre because the Anderson was the last ship that had any contact with the Fitzgerald. So we were kind of in awe by that at the time. Getting back to Whitefish Point though, the different structures, we've investigated twice up there now, and what we've found is activity in every place we've been able to investigate. This is the one building we have not gotten into, built in 1923 as a cruise quarters for the Coast Guard. It's a bed and breakfast now, you can rent the rooms out. There are several apparitions that have been cited in this building we've gotten reports on. Many guests report waking up, seeing a man in a blue lightkeeper's uniform. Looks something like that. But also lights being turned on, doorknobs being turned. We've gotten reports of people leaving in the middle of the night. So again, this is the one building, unfortunately, when we've been there, there's always been people spending the night there. We haven't been able to investigate this particular building. Buildings we have looked into, the actual keeper's quarters, which the tower is attached to. There are reports of a woman walking the catwalk, dressed in period costume. We've heard this often from people, and it's been reported to the people that run the operations out there. Why would a woman be up here when all the lightkeeper listed were men? Well, if you go back in time, quite often the keepers' wives were involved. If the keepers could not be there at the time, their families all pitched in and actually ran these lights. And it was fairly well known that if the keeper got put down, if he was sick, had to go into town, got stranded somewhere, that it would fall to the families if there wasn't an assistant keeper on at the time. So we kind of attribute this to possibly being one of the keeper's wives who was watching the light at one time. Also, Native American woman is seen walking the grounds quite often. We know, of course, this whole area, originally a Chippewa area. We haven't actually experienced that ourselves. We're just going off secondhand reports on this. Unexplained noises, shadows, all the buildings on the ground. One of the more significant stories, there was a young girl who had lived in one of the buildings on the premises. Her father was a member of the military at the time. And it was a very lonely place again. The keeper had his family over. They had young girls. They were playing with these other young ladies at the time, and they heard screaming from upstairs. When they went back to check on the kids, the youngest daughter had caught herself on fire while they were playing upstairs. She later died of those injuries. And there's a young lady reported walking across the grounds. It's been seen in windows. When we were out there on one of our investigations, we heard giggling that sounded like a small girl from the second floor of the keeper's quarters. When we went up to investigate, we put one of our EMF meters to measure the electromagnetic field on the floor. Continued to ask questions. The needle on the meter was jumping for probably 4 to 5 minutes, and then it just stopped. So I guess she got irritated with us after a while, but we feel that it may be this young lady that we were communicating with at the time. Also ghost ships. Something that we can't really investigate very easily. Hard to get out in the middle of Lake Superior with all of our equipment on a raft. But ghost ships have been reported off the coast at this point. Not uncommon out there. And this is just some pictures of us when we were out there. September 2007, we went back in May of 2009. We would like to get back out there again. There's enough activity to warrant it. Again, little girl laughing, strange lights moving in the theater. Possibly our best photo ever. This was captured in the Shipwreck Museum. Kind of see right up in this area. It's a blue energy blurb of some sort. Now the significance of this, it's easy to write it off. However, it was the end of the night. Tim was asking questions. We had an EVP session going. He said, we're getting ready to wrap things up. We'd like to thank you for allowing us here. If there's anyone that could give us a sign and let us know that you are here, this is the time to do it. Heard a noise behind us. I turned and snapped this picture. Now, the beautiful thing about digital photography is you can review it on the spot. If we see something that appears to be an anomaly, we'll turn and take from the same location another 10 to 20 pictures to try and rule anything else out. This was not a glare. We couldn't reproduce it in any of the other pictures. It only showed up in this one picture. And it's what we've affectionately called our ghost spot. If you look at it, there's the big ghost spot. It kind of looks like we're getting mooned by a ghost at the end of the night. It's still one of our most talked about photos that we've gotten in our 13 years doing this now. So,
All right, so going from getting mooned by ghosts to Sichuan Point Lighthouse. We're going to stay with another haunted lighthouse. How many people have been there? Gulliver, Michigan? All right.
Only a couple.
If you've been to both Whitefish and Gulliver, you may understand what I'm about to talk about here. We've had the privilege to investigate both a number of times. If you go to Gulliver and Sichuan Point Lighthouse, it's almost like walking into Grandma's house. It's very warm, very welcoming, even though there's a reported number of ghosts there. And every time we've gone to Gulliver, we walk away scratching our heads from stuff happening. It's become our Disney World to us. We love to get there. But you're never feeling frightened. It's very warm and welcoming. Whereas Whitefish Point, every time we've gone there, every time we've walked up, there's a very heavy feeling about Whitefish. Not scary, but heavy. And probably due to the fact that so many lives were lost just off of Lake Superior. But that doesn't mean that Gulliver doesn't have its own share of shipwrecks and life lost as well. The ghost stories of Gulliver and Sichuan have actually spurred on 2 children's books. You don't often hear ghost stories in children's books, but it's called
The Captain and Harry.
The Captain and Harry.
It's
It's a 2-book series. It's about a little mouse who lives in the lighthouse and has befriended Captain Townsend, who is the most famous ghost at Sichuan Point. But again, not that Sichuan Point is not without its disasters. In the early 1800s, the French fur traders who would come into this area, they would try to make this bay right in here, because once you get out past that top point, you're exposed, and this became known as the only choice, or Sichuan Point. All right, if you ever go, make sure you pronounce it correctly. If you say, hey, we're Sault Choiks, they know you're visiting. All right, it's Sichuan Point. And so this became known as only choice by the French fur traders to get into this area and save themselves from the storms. In 1886, $15,000 was given to build Sichuan Point Lighthouse, and in 1895 is what you see here on the bottom, a photo of when the lighthouse was originally completed and ready for operation on Lake Michigan. Now again, many ghosts have been reported at Sichuan Point. A couple different psychics or mediums have been there. Both have hit on the number 6. They believe there are 6 different ghosts that possibly reside at the Sichuan Point Lighthouse, but by far the most famous is Captain Joseph Willie Townsend. He was the lightkeeper from 1902 to 1910, originally from England. A very hard man, very harsh, not friendly. He was tough to work for. And because he was not a local, and this was a small fishing community, many people were not happy that Captain Townsend was given the head job of the keeper. They thought someone local should get the position. And in 1910, he was very ill, passed away in one of the bedrooms upstairs in the lighthouse, was embalmed in the basement, and laid to rest in the lighthouse. And it is reported that he still walks the house today. Some of the reported activity, and the ones you'll see check marks next to, are actually ones that we have experienced while we've been there in many of our investigations. The smell of cigar smoke is one of the more popular stories of Sichuan Point, because Captain Townsend loved to smoke cigars, but his wife would never let him smoke in the house, so he always had to go out on the porch. Well, now today you smell the smell of cigar smokes in the house, so it's as if Captain Townsend's getting the last laugh. He's smoking all he wants now. Smell of perfume. A couple of the other spirits that are supposed to be in the house are of females, and the smell of perfume is very strong in the house at times. Now, one of the more controversial but very popular stories of Sichuan Point are the faces that appear in one of the bedroom mirrors. This has become very popular. We may or may not have experienced this, we don't know, we'll talk about that in a bit. The rearranging of silverware, because Captain Townsend was from England, when they would set the formal table, they would set their silverware in the English style. Well, today, the Historical Society who runs the tours through the lighthouse, they have the table set up in the modern way that we set our silverware. Oftentimes, the tour guides will show up in the morning to open it up, and the silverware will be rearranged in the English setting on the tables. And of course, a man keeper's uniform spotted in windows, and it's very possible we may have witnessed that ourselves. 4 different times we've had the privilege of investigating it. The latest one was just 2 weeks ago. We actually did a fundraiser for the Gulliver Historical Society at our latest Paracon. Brad put this together for us. We sold tickets for people to come on a ghost hunt with us at Sichuan Point Lighthouse, and all the money raised we gave to the Historical Society for the upkeep of their lighthouse. Now, the face in the mirror, again, is the very popular story of Sichuan Point Lighthouse, and you'll see what appears to be something up here in the corner of the mirror. This was actually happened on our very first investigation at Sichuan Point, and half the team was with this lady you see here is Marilyn Fisher. She's the president of the Historical Society there. She was given a tour and explaining the different stories. And I was with the other half of the team down in the kitchen area setting up what would eventually become our base camp for that night. And all of a sudden we get radioed on the radio on the 2-ways saying we need to get up here, there's something happening in the mirror. So we go running upstairs, And again, we're not saying by any means that we captured a face here in the mirror, but they always say it is to believe to be Captain Townsend, who usually appears in the mirror. But here are some of the interesting things that happened at this very moment. The gentleman you see in the background there, one of our investigators who was filming it at the time, as soon as this happens, as soon as this starts to appear in the mirror, the battery on his camera dies. Keep in mind, we had just gotten there. All of our batteries were fully charged, or brand new batteries were put into our equipment. The battery there dies. The camera, the still camera that took this photo, immediately after this picture was taken, the battery dies. So 2 electronic equipments, batteries are drained, and with us at the time, his name is Bob Williams, and he's part of the Historical Society as well. He claims to be sensitive, kind of a bit of a psychic. And he says, guys, there's something right here on my shoulder. There's something going on. There's someone behind me. We had some of our temperature reading equipment, and right there, sure enough, there was a 10-degree difference in temperature just by his shoulder. And so again, we're not saying that this is Captain Townsend, maybe eyes, nose, mouth, or beard. We're not saying that's him. But while this was going on, some very interesting things were happening with our equipment and with the people around us. Some of the other things that happened while we were doing an investigation, right here down in the left-hand corner, you see there's a light post here in the front yard. That's on a timer. It'll come on just as the sun is going down, because Sichuan Point Lighthouse is in the middle of nowhere. You are surrounded by woods. And so while people are still leaving, this light will come on, but usually by about 10 o'clock or so, it's on a timer and it goes off for the night once people are gone for the evening. This one particular investigation, it was just the team, and the light was out. This is probably about 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. Me and the team that I was with, we were outside, while Brad and the team he was with was inside the house doing some work, and we wanted to stay outside so we didn't make noise and contaminate the recordings. And we're sitting there talking, and all of a sudden, about 3 o'clock in the morning, this light post comes on. Boom. And let me tell you, when you're in the middle of nowhere and it's pitch dark out, when that thing comes on, it illuminates everything. And it startled us. So immediately we radio up to Brad, and we're like, are you guys in the basement? Did you flip the switches or anything to turn this light on? And Brad says, no, as a matter of fact, they were upstairs in the 2nd floor doing an EVP session, and at that very moment, Brad had asked if anyone was here with us, give us a sign. At that very moment, that light post turned on for everyone to see. Very interesting. But what could be one of our most interesting and favorite things that ever happened to us. You'll see these windows right here. These 2 windows are the kitchen. These 2 are the formal dining room. And this one particular investigation, we'd gotten there, we set up all of our equipment, and we went outside. We wanted to just let our equipment do its stuff. We didn't want to have anyone in the house, and we know for a fact no one was in that house. And so we're standing out here where these cars are parked, and we brought cigars with us because we thought, hey, let's light up a cigar and toast Captain Townsend. Let's salute him. Maybe we can get him excited. And so that's exactly what we did. We're all standing out here in the parking lot, and we light the cigars, and we're coughing and choking, and we're like, Captain Townsend, this is for you. We hope you'll give us an active night tonight. And just then, a few of us notice in the windows over here, this shadow walk by. These 2 windows here, which are the formal dining room, had curtains closed. So as we see the shadow go by the kitchen windows, we yell to the rest of the team, we just saw something move in front of the windows. So by then, everyone's watching over in this area, and this window right here, as the entire team sitting there watching it, the curtain gets pulled back, as though someone is pulling the curtain back to see who's outside. We don't see anything. We don't see anyone. We don't hear anything. We just watch this curtain get pulled back and stays that way for a couple seconds, and then it just slowly gets shut. Well, needless to say, we start freaking out. This was Christmas morning for us. We're all yelling. And finally, after a few seconds, we realized, all right, we got to actually do what we do. We got to go in and investigate. There's something just happened in the house. So at the very moment, me and another guy, Steve, the door to get in is around this corner here. We run around the corner with our equipment, and we're ready to go in, and I'm about to open up the front door, and everyone always asks us, have you guys ever been scared on your investigations? And I can say I don't think I've ever really been scared, but at that moment, while I'm reaching for the door handle, I remember asking myself, what the hell am I doing? Because I had no idea what was going to be behind that door when I opened it. But after a second of thinking that, I whipped the door open and we go in, and there was no one there, but we got blasted in the face with a strong smell of perfume, kind of the old lilac that grandmas used to wear. Remember grandma perfume? And it smells like lilacs. And we were blasted in the face, both Steve and I, with this lilac perfume. So very interesting night at Sichuan Point for us. And like I said, every time we've gone to Sichuan, we always leave with something that we cannot explain what happened.
Sheboygan Opera House. Now, this has a very interesting history to it. Back in the day, this was, Sheboygan was still kind of rustic, but it was becoming a booming lumber town. And the lumber barons of the day really had it in their mind that Sheboygan was going to become this big metropolis. They were building large homes there. They decided they needed a focal point for the community. So they helped to fund the building of the Opera House. Originally put up in 1877, and there were all kinds of rumors about the land that it was put on being cursed. And of course, as it would happen back in the day, superstitious, a lot of talk. But once it burned down, all of a sudden, more people were taking notice and saying, well, maybe there was something to this. They couldn't really figure out what caused the fire. Well, after it burned down a second time on the same location, people really took notice of it. However, they went ahead, rebuilt it again, and that is the building that you see as of today, the building that was put back up. Houses the city offices, fire station, police station. They're all housed in the bottom. You go inside and it's this magnificent room though. You would never know from the exterior of the building that this opera hall is in there. You see a picture of it right here. It has a twin up in Calumet, Michigan, the Calumet Opera House. They were built by the same architect. Calumet Theater or Opera House also has rumors of being haunted. A lot of different stories regarding that, but let's stick with Sheboygan right now. Why it would be haunted, we don't know. I mean, outside of the fires, there was no loss of life that we could find. No tragedies really associated with it, but there's this old rumor of this curse that's stuck with it. And reported activity coming from many, many people, actors, people that actually work in the police station, fire department, reported stage lights turning on and off on their own when nobody was in the area with the controls. Ghostly man sitting in a balcony. This was reported to us from several different sources. A ghostly woman walking across the stage is something we may or may not have caught. We'll get to that in a little bit. And a haunted bathroom. First we get mooned, now we're getting haunted in the bathroom. So
That's not what we signed up for.
No. Myself and another team member, Lee, we were tearing down at the end of one of our investigations here, and it had been a fairly quiet night. And we're up on the balcony level, and we're right in front of the women's bathroom on that level. No reports from there, but we'd had a camera shooting the whole hallway. We could get a pretty good view of it. Well, as we're wrapping up our cables and tearing down the cameras, all of a sudden there's this loud bang right against the bathroom door, which was maybe 2 feet away from us. Once again, we stopped and looked at each other. And kind of similar to what Tim described, I said, okay, we've got to go in there. Open up the door, expected to see a garbage can knocked down or something that had fallen off the wall. Absolutely nothing out of place. Nothing had been moved, nothing on the floor, nothing that we could explain that sound. After the fact, we got talking with one of the maintenance guys in the building, and he said, oh yeah, that door opens and closes on its own all the time. And he said, we hear people flushing the toilet in there. And he said at one time it was, there was some sort of a dressing room it was connected to up there. And he said, there's all kinds of legends around that. I said, well, thanks for telling us. So after the fact, we found out there was somewhat of a legend around this bathroom. As far as the lady moving across the stage, we'll take a little bit closer look at this. You can see, I don't know if you can see this very well or not, we brighten it up. Right off to the corner here, you can kind of see what looks like a blue form. This is a Christmas tree in front of it. It was in December that we were down there. You can see the position of it right here. So as usual, we snap another couple pictures to see if we can get anything different on it. And if you look here, you can see that figure's actually moved behind the tree. So what was this? We don't believe it was a reflection. It only showed up in these 2 photographs. After that, it was gone. Again, we took numerous photos, went back and reviewed it, and that was what we thought of it was probably moved about 2 to 3 feet within that period, and then was gone with the rest of the investigation. We did catch, this is, we'll let you hear it. It's an interesting story behind it. We had our two-way radios. There was one team down in the basement where we had headquarters set up. Tim and another member, Matt Barr, were up in the balcony area where they report seeing this man all the time. They're doing an EVP session trying to capture a voice, and you'll hear on here what happens when they're asking the questions.
And so we just want to find out more about you. We need to know who you are, what your name is, how old you are.
I'm going to snap a few pictures here, and by pictures we mean photos or photographs. Just, some images of the area. And if you want to just pop up in one of them, that would be great. I'd be pleased as punch. What the
Caught Tim off guard, obviously.
I wasn't afraid.
He was not afraid, no. Good start. This came across our two-way radios. Now you could say, very easily dismiss this as some kid fooling around with you. The interesting facts around it, though, were nobody knew we were there that night outside of us and a couple of members of management. Even if they did, they would have no idea what channel we were on our two-ways. To go a little further into that, we've had investigations where we've had other voices where other people have been on the same channel that we've had to switch over. There was no chatter on this prior to it. The radios were not on. Tim was not transmitting on his two-way to us at the time. It was it wasn't turned off, but it was not transmitting. So there's no way anybody else would have heard them doing their questioning at the time or asking for the sign. There was also no chatter before or after this occurred. So this was a standalone incident, which obviously put us a little bit on edge at the time, but made for an interesting evening. Ojibwe, how many people have been there? At least know where it is. A lot of great history behind this place. It was put up, obviously, people here would know, right outside of Sioux Locks Park. The interesting thing about the land was donated by Governor Chase Osborne, the only governor hailing from the Upper Peninsula. This was in an area that may or may not have been a makeshift graveyard at one time. We don't really know. It was a period of time where if construction was being done and you hit bones, you got rid of them and kept going. The locks being put in right next door, a lot of immigrant workers. If they died, there were no families, no relatives. How far did they haul them to bury them? We don't know. So it's an interesting plot of land. Was put up by, as I said, Governor Chase Osborne backed this. He felt that the Sioux needed a metropolitan hotel to call its own and kind of a gathering place, much like the lumber barons felt about Sheboygan Opera House. And it was open to a huge soiree on New Year's Eve, 1927. Still reports to this day of a gentleman in a top hat and tails walking through the lobby of the Ojibwe. Was it built on graves? We don't know. That may or may not play into the history of it. Reported activity. We get a lot of reports from kitchen staff, wait staff, that objects get moved often in the lounge, everything from salt shakers flying off shelves, objects falling off walls, disembodied voices being heard. There's even, as I mentioned, the full body apparition of a man walking through the lobby. And Beatrice, who was a former owner of the Ojibwe, she had her own suite that is still rumored to be haunted. We've had reports from the staff there that people actually get up in the middle of the night and leave because they wake up to see a woman sitting on the edge of their bed, who dissipates after that, and just enough to startle a few people. Not scared, but startled.
That's
just
right.
Like we get.
That's right.
So, and of course, Twilight walking tours with Jim Cooling. If you haven't been on it, Wood Smoke Jim's with us tonight. We'll tell you a lot more stories of this place, very in-depth versions of them. We don't have a lot of time to get into them. A couple of the things that we have had happen. Go ahead, Tim. We investigated there in 2010. It was not the best of conditions. It was a Saturday night before Halloween. It was booked out with people partying, hitting the local bar loops, and well, so anyway, we didn't catch much in the way of audio we could use on it. Things that were interesting that happened, we had full access to one suite. A friend of ours was a psychic, Lisa J. Smith. She used to have a show on CBS Radio called Lisa J. Now, was with us. And she reported that she woke up to this bed shaking in this room. This was where she was staying at the time. So we had the entire room roped off. We had cameras set up. And at one point in the investigation, and keeping in mind we have cameras on the door, we know no one came in and out, one of the cameras actually jumped as if it was being bumped by somebody walking by it. Again, nobody in the room. What caused it? We don't know. Same room that the bed's been known to shake in, and curtains have been seen moving in. So that was about all we could pick up that night. One other thing to comment on that, just the entire block down there seems to have a lot of activity. We get reports from many of the bars and restaurants down there. We've investigated the Satisfied Frog. We've got Chris, the owner, there here tonight. And just all kinds of activity though on that block. And whether or not this ties into the possible graveyard scenario, could be. A lot of history down there.
And again, if you want to hear a lot more of it, real in-depth with great storytelling, definitely check out Twilight Walking Tours with Jim and his family. They do a fantastic job. Mission Point Resort on beautiful and historical Mackinac Island. Obviously, most people Mackinac Island, right? Been there? Anyone ever stay at Mission Point? A couple of you, all right. Yeah, I've actually stayed there a couple times myself, and it's an absolutely beautiful place. The second most luxurious resort on the island, just second to, of course, the Grand Hotel. Of course, Mackinac Island, it truly is a magical place. It's a place where you step off the boat and you're immediately taken back into time. You just get that feeling. And just next time you do step onto the island, just realize you probably, per capita, per living human people in a square radius, you're probably stepping on what could be the most haunted place in the U.S., if not the world. Mission Point Resort, though, has quite the history, long history. Originally built in 1825 as a Protestant missionary school, hence the name Mission Point. And it stayed that way until the mid-1900s, 1950s, right after World War II. The MRA, or the Moral Rearmament Organization, took it over, and this actually became their headquarters. And what the MRA was, for some of the younger folks who may not know, is actually kind of a feel-good group that came about after World War II. It's kind of like, hey, life is good, let's not, it was kind of a prelude, I think, to the hippie era. Let's be friendly to each other, no more war, no more fighting kind of thing. And that was actually where their headquarters were stationed for a while. And then in 1966 to 1970, it was only open for 4 years, but it actually became Mackinac College. There was only one actual graduating class from it that went the full 4 years. And this is a picture of the graduating class there at Mackinac College. Early 1970s, went back to the Protestants for a couple of years, and then eventually got sold to Mackinac Island, when it became Hotel and Convention Center, and finally in 1987 became what we know it as today as Mission Point Resort. Now, the reported activity at Mission Point, as you can see, it is a large area. It takes up a lot of ground, and it is everything that you can imagine. The judge, the man in the black robe seen in the bar in the lobby area. Now, is he a judge, or was he one of the Protestant ministers at the time? We don't know, but it's someone who's seen in a black robe. Figures seen in the women's steam room. That sounds a little fishy, but apparently that is reported by a lot of the women in the area.
That wasn't also the judge, was it?
You never know. The famous haunted room 2200. This was the room that was featured on the episode of Ghost Hunters called Frozen in Fear. Brad and I actually had, when we investigated Mission Point Resort, our team as well, got to stay in that room too. And unfortunately nothing spooky happened that night. We weren't scared. The theater, a lot of reports in the theater too. As you can see, the man seen walking the floor, girl seen in the balcony is a real popular haunt that we tried to find the night we were there. Seats moving on their own, we kind of experienced that, people being touched, voices quite often. As you can see, it's just, the reports are endless when it comes to Mission Point Resort. In 2011, we were able to investigate Mission Point. It was definitely a highlight of the 13 years that we've been doing this. We had actually started the process back in the winter of 2010 to set this up, and we were all set, and then next thing we know, we kind of got pushed to the back burner and we didn't understand what happened. And then we find out a TV show called Ghost Hunters wanted to come in and film an episode, la-di-da. So, Sci-Fi Channel gets to come in the dead of winter and do their episode, and then we got to come in the springtime, right after the lake lost the ice. We were able to get across on Arnold Line, and so this was early April, and the best part about it was no one was at the resort yet other than a few workers. It had not opened up for business, so we had the entire complex to ourselves, and what a night it was. It was a cold, rainy morning when we pulled up to the dock that day, and it rained the entire day. And keep in mind, we had to take our equipment, horse and buggy, all the way up.
Which was a new experience for us.
Yeah, we've never done that before.
We've got thousands of dollars in electronical equipment,
And we're wrapping it up in baggies and keeping it safe.
and it's raining, and we're on horse and buggy.
And so few workers were already on the island that they didn't have enough horse and buggies to take us all, so a few of us had to hoof it up to the resort from the dock as well. And then the rain continued throughout the night, and as night fell and we're continuing to investigate, and you had seen that picture how much ground the resort takes up, a lot of our night was spent going from building to building, so we're inside, we're outside, we're inside, we're outside. It starts to snow on us in April. And it was a heavy snow, and a wet heavy snow. So we went from being soaking wet to freezing cold all night long, but it didn't matter because we were not going to let anything ruin this night for us. Some of the things that happened to us in the investigation, again, almost kind of like what happened as Brad was explaining in the Ojibwe Hotel. We have a camera that for no explained reason is actually bumped and moved. Lights turning on and off on us, a door that closed on its own, chairs moving in the theater, and possibly maybe something that we captured in the balcony. And this is this gentleman here is Steve LaPlante, one of the founding members with us. He was walking through the theater, and when this photo was taken from the stage area, and it's hard to see up here, but we'll lighten it up for you. This is the balcony up here, and this is where the reported area of the little girl is reported to happen quite a lot and seen up in that area. And then once we lighten this photo up, you'll see something up in this area here. Don't mind those are just dust orbs, but something up here which seems to have a bit of a figure to it. Possible head, shoulders, torso, standing right at the area of where the balcony starts. So what we captured there, we can't say for sure, but very interesting photo for sure that we keep in the files, and right in the area of where the little girl is seen quite a bit. So, all 6 of our locations that we talked about here tonight, the Eastland Disaster, Sichuan Point, Whitefish, Ojibwe, Mission Point, Sheboygan Opera House, all of them are open to the public, and all of them are must-sees around the Great Lakes area. So if you're ever out and about and you get the chance to go to all these places, do so. Most of them, if not all of them, I'm not sure about the new crew out at Whitefish Point, but most of them are very open about talking about their ghost stories too and sharing them with you if you ever have any questions. Our investigation at Mission Point Resort is actually on a new DVD that we have out. Our first DVD here, Ghost Hunting with the UPPRS, has one of our investigations at Whitefish Point and also at the Antlers Restaurant here in the Sault. And our newest one that just came out not too long ago is Ghost Hunting on Mackinac Island, is actually the DVD that features our investigation at Mission Point Resort. We do have those here with us tonight. We also have our t-shirts, the same t-shirts Brad and I are wearing. For $15, you can get all 3 for $50. Any money that is sold here tonight goes right back to the team and to help us continue the funding of what we do.
And the DVDs aren't something that we put together stumbling around. We were approached back in 2007 by a production company out of the Western UP, Keweenaw Video Productions, and they'd heard of us and knew some of our work and wanted to know if they could come along and tape a few investigations. And these were the 2 that we caught the most evidence on, and the most they got on camera, so that's what they put together originally. It did well enough. They came back to us and asked us if we'd do something with them on Mackinac Island, excuse me. So that's how the second one came about. So they are professionally produced videos, and they are available in stores throughout the region too. This is the only way we make any money off them, is selling them when we do our events.
So other than that, if you don't already, you can follow us online. We are everywhere. We do have our own website at upprs.org. You can follow us on Facebook, which we spend way too much time on. And also to miparacon.com. That is the official website of our paranormal convention that we put on every summer. So you can follow that website as well, and that'll give you updates on what's going on and who our speaking lineup will be for the new season.
We also put out a quarterly email newsletter. We have a sign-up sheet under the TV over here on the stand. All you have to do is put your name and email address on it, free of charge. We don't give your information to anybody else. We put it out. We try and put it out every 3 months. Sometimes it goes closer to 4, but keeps you up to date with what we're doing, gives you a little bit of history and some different ghost stories that we've been researching at the time, and any updates we have on things like Paracon or Golf Scramble or any philanthropy is in it. So, and just some fun reading material too we throw in there.
And keep in mind that the stories we shared here with you tonight are just scratching the surface of the haunted reports and the stories and legends of this Great Lakes region. So just know that you truly do live in one of the most haunted areas out there. So other than that, we'll open the floor up to any questions. If you have any stories to share, we'd love to hear your stories, and we'll take those one-on-one. But we'd like to keep this part just for questions that we'll try to answer for you. And so at this time, we'll open it up. If anyone has any questions, please raise your hand. Yes?
Don't people have to die for there to be spirits? I mean, like, what were, like, some of these stories of, like, how it all sort of started?
It's goes by different locations, really. One of the most popular stories at Mission Point that we just covered was a student there named Harvey that supposedly committed suicide over the loss of a girlfriend. So there's that tragedy ties in there. As I pointed out earlier with the Sheboygan Opera House, there's really no story of a death behind it. But now, could that have been an actor that was very tied to that location, and maybe it was someplace that he really loved in life, and when he died of natural causes, came back to spend some time there? We don't know. This is what we researched to try and find out, and those are just a couple of things that we look at.
Yeah. And there's a whole nother level of talking about paranormal if you're talking about an entity that was not a person at one time, and we're not even going to get into that tonight. But you're right. At some point, they had to be a person at these locations, or work there, or love to be in there. Yes?
What is the most compelling evidence you've ever found?
It's a good question. We've got some EVPs which we share in our first presentation that we gave here last year. There's some EVPs we captured from back then what was Superior Impressions. It's now the brew pub and whatnot. And we got some really neat stuff that happened there, and we're still waiting to get that full body apparition. But over 13 years, we've got files full of unexplained stuff. But again, when you're dealing with the paranormal and a subject matter like this, you've got to be careful what you're trying to throw out there as evidence and saying, here's what we captured, because there's a lot of critics out there. Yes?
Now, I suggest you try and get permission to examine the presence of possible paranormal things at the Historical Society here in town. And also check out their 3 historical homes down along the canal. See if you get permission from the girls to do that also.
We've actually did have a chance to, we did have a chance to investigate the actual Historical Society building one year, so we were there already. And the one thing we are going to look at for next spring and summer is to look at those historical homes. So yeah, we'll be working towards that for sure. Yeah. Yes, sir.
The Nichols family that lived on the Bound Road off of M28, they moved to Wisconsin. I don't know exactly where it was now. One of the boys has moved back here, and his name is Dennis. But they built farm equipment, and they're still manufacturing it up here, but Dennis moved back. But about an island. And this island had been owned by some rich people, had numerous houses on it, and a little train and a large building that apparently they used for entertainment. And Dennis was a carpenter, and he was over there working one day, and he had to go outside to pick up something. He went to go back in, the door was locked. And the piano was playing. And there was nobody else on the island.
That's a good one. I like that. That's a good one. Yeah. Yes.
I was curious about the Ojibwe Hotel because they redone that complete building, gutted it. And are the stories that you heard from before they remodeled or after?
Both.
Both.
Both. They come, yeah.
I would say the majority are prior to the remodeling.
Oh, okay.
Sometimes, one of the theories that we work on is when people come in and take over a historical place, or it doesn't even necessarily have to be historical, and start gutting it and remodeling and changing things around, if there's a spirit or an entity attached to that place that may have been a former owner or occupant of the place, and you're changing around their living conditions, they don't take kindly to that, and that may be where some paranormal activity gets stirred up from.
I actually see a picture of a big red bathtub in that one picture.
Red bathtub.
It might have been like a hot tub or something, I'm not sure. We didn't use it if it was.
I think that was their favorite color though when they remodeled for carpet and everything.
Yeah, you're right, that color, that kind of reddish pink is through the hotel quite a bit. Yes.
Have you guys ever did an investigation at Fort Mackinac on Mackinac Island?
No.
I've heard that's haunted.
Yeah.
The Park Service there is very strict about keeping the ghost image outside of anything they do. Even when they do tours around this time of year, they'll call it Ghastly Mackinac. They don't attach the ghost word to anything. We've inquired before,
And the same people also run the fort in Mackinac City as well, so yeah, we're kind of meeting locked doors on both of those. Yes?
Are you gonna show off some of the equipment that you...
Well, we do have the equipment there. If anyone afterwards wants to come up and just take a look at some of the stuff we bought, you're more than welcome to. Yep. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
How often do you guys, lose your batteries? Like you find a spirit maybe absorbing it, or does it happen a lot, or no?
Not a lot, which makes it even that much more interesting when it does happen.
because it's happened several times at Sichuan Point.
Yep.
So it makes it all the more significant. In fact, we were investigating there with Bev Rydell and Kat Tedson, who write the Haunted Travels of Michigan book series, and they had the exact same thing happen. They put fresh batteries in their cameras and both went dead within a matter of minutes. So it's kind of neat there, and it's maybe no coincidence that that's where we've recorded the most evidence out of, I would say, any place we've investigated. So obviously something going on there.
Have you had an investigation where you had no paranormal activity at all
Lots, all of
whatsoever?
it. Lots, all of it. Understand what you're watching on
So
TV
what
is
your
edited
percentage
a
of
lot.
people actually be telling there's haunted or they saying it? What's the percentage?
High anymore.
Yeah.
Ever since the TV shows come out and have gained the popularity that they have, a lot of people are looking to have ghosts in their homes. And some people get very upset when we go in and tell them what we find and it's not paranormal. That's our first goal when we go in, is to inspect and see what's going on with the house and the people living there. We rule out everything before we look at a paranormal explanation. And some people have the attitude of, don't take away my ghost. They don't want us in there to tell them what's going on. They want us in there to confirm that, yes, your house is haunted. And one of the unfortunate things right now, there's a lot of teams popping up. No problems with that. That's great to see the interest. But some of these teams that are coming to the forefront now learn everything by watching television shows, and that's probably the worst way you could approach it. And if you find someone who really wants you to come in and confirm, and we go in and say, no, you have some outdated electric, some wiring that needs to be updated, some plumbing issues, and they say, well, no, it's haunted. Well, then they'll go to the next team and the next team. And we've experienced this several times where people have went and found 3 or 4 paranormal investigation groups that will come in until one finally, and eventually you're going to find one that will say, oh yeah, your house is haunted. And they'll go through this until they've got that, and then that's the team that has all the answers. So it's gotten interesting.